thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you today. As you know, my family roots are in beef, and they still are, and I love a good steak. So thank you for everybody for joining us and for what you do in this industry. So we're going to have a little conversation about farm and food care, our model, and what we're trying to do to engage with Canadians in this concept of building public trust and how that fits with what you're interested in with sustainability. So a few starting principles just to get us on the same page. A lot of people are using the term social license. Have you heard the term social license? It's the new S word gaining on sustainability, I would say, for popularity. And a lot of people are interested in social license. And so the way we describe it is our real goal is to have public trust in beef. The outcome of that might be social license, might be. So it's kind of like when you're 16 or whatever age it is here in Alberta or where you're from, and you're really gunning for your driver's license, right? You really want that ability to drive, right? It really affects your dating success in high school. And so you're really focused on getting that license. You can get where you need to be. But your real goal should be to be a good driver. Right? So our real goal should be good at producing beef sustainably and have public trust in it, and the outcome of that might be to get your license. Okay? So that's our thinking. This is not unique to agriculture or food or beef or Canada or Alberta. This is a global conversation happening around many sectors: oil and gas, forestry, aquaculture, agriculture. This is not just about us, but we're going to focus on Canada and some of our work here. This should not be a competitive issue. We have fiercely competitive companies sitting in the room together sharing this conversation. That wouldn't have happened 5 years ago when you'd sit next. Are you two competitors right here? I know you are. Yeah, so we got them right here in the front lineup. These are like, you know what, the cattle auction, when you got the buyers that are buddies, but they bid against each other on the cattle? This is the equivalent we have right here in this room. It demonstrates the point. When it comes to, yeah, Darren, you're out. Yeah, you're not buying. Yeah, you're just goading them into buying. That's what you're doing. Yeah, that's a true story right there. So this should not be a competitive issue. This should be a collaborative issue. And guess what? The supply chain was not designed for collaboration. It was designed for competitive advantage. And so this is a game changer. This is not a communications issue. We are not going to advertise our way to public trust. Trust us, beef is great. It's always a sunny day with a butterfly, right? This is built on actually doing the right thing first and then communicating about it second. This is also a business issue. So the base of a successful beef industry for the future is based on having good public trust. It doesn't matter how efficient and modern and innovative and how much you invest in animal health and biosecurity and traceability if your next door neighbor doesn't give you permission to grow cattle. So this is the heart of what we're trying to talk about. And I really believe the game has changed, and the people at this conference are part of the conversation to say, so what do we want to do about it, and where do we play? So enter Farm and Food Care. We were created about 2010 as a national charity, but pretty fledgling efforts. I just became CEO full-time this year in January, so really turning it up, our efforts. Canada's a big country. This work of building public trust in food is a big job. So the principle of Farm and Food Care was actually started by farmers themselves to say we're 2% of the population. 93% of Canadians know little or nothing about farming. It's not getting any better. And there's no difference between rural and urban. It's not a city person problem anymore. This is a discussion with Canadians, and what do we do about it? So the model was pretty unique. We studied some other examples in other sectors that I mentioned, other countries. The trend line from the UK, EU, you heard from our fabulous Dr. Food this morning, from other countries is coming to Canada. It is solid trend line, not dotted. So nobody should be surprised about anything that's happening regarding public trust in our food in Canada, because it's already happened somewhere else. So our model was starting with the farmers and going all the way through the whole food system. If you believe in credible information about food and farming, you're on the team. I don't care if you're selling John Deere tractors or semen. That is a job, by the way. It's a big job. You're part of the team, right? And so you're part of this conversation. It's not up to an association that you just pay fees to and they're going to look after it. This is a movement, and you're all part of it if you believe in credible information. So we do three things. The first pillar of our work is intelligence, strategy, and research. So this is like the R&D division. I'm going to tell you about the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity, which is the division of Farm and Food Care that focuses on that. The second thing we do, which is the topic of the day, is actually engaging with Canadians. Let's have a conversation. Crazy talk, I know. It's like, what do you think? What do you think? What do you have a question about? Let's find some answers. Let's have a conversation. And I already mentioned this is a team effort, collaborating with as many partners as possible. And I'll give you some examples of that. So our research division that I mentioned, Canadian Centre for Food Integrity, how many Americans here today? Oh, quite a few. Apparently, according to my name tag, I'm from the United States too. I have a great fake Southern accent. I'll put it on at the banquet if you like, after a few glasses of wine maybe. And so, this Center for Food Integrity was actually formed in the U.S. in 2007. It was United Soybean Growers who did a study where they found the #1 threat to grain farmers in the U.S. was the loss of domestic livestock. So they were literally spending millions of dollars a year on export development, right? Japan focused on selling soybeans, American soybeans to Japan. And they went, hey, guess what? Japan can shut a border in a day. If that beef feedlot in Iowa goes out of business, that's a much greater threat to us than Japan. So it was literally the soybean growers that put a lot of money on the table and said, hey, guess what, livestock sector? Come to the table with us and work with us on building public trust in American food. So I am a Scottish farm girl. I had to coach her on how to pronounce Mackay. I am a Scottish farm girl, and I said, guess what? They've already spent millions of dollars south of the border figuring this out for 8 years. Can we just not bring it to Canada and spell centre correctly? Right? So, really pleased. We're really new. We just launched the Center for Food Integrity in June. Some of you in the room were part of it. Some of our founding members are here today, and we really appreciate your support. This is absolutely leadership. This is not status quo +1. It's like the game has changed. What are the players going to do things differently? So we launched at the Public Trust Summit. We were in the Globe and Mail that morning, and we trended #2 on Twitter that day behind a general called Romeo Dallaire, who is a major peacekeeper from Canada, and I am pleased to be #2 to Romeo Dallaire any day of the week. So it was a pretty great way to kick off the Center for Food Integrity. Our next forum, and creating the forum for the conversation with the whole supply chain in itself, is a win. And so the next forum we have coming up in November is specifically for restaurant, grocery, and food company executives to say, hey, you want to hear about antibiotics? What is an antibiotic? What's an antimicrobial? What's antimicrobial resistance? This is complicated stuff. What does raise without mean? Raise without ever. What does that mean? What if you do have to treat a sick animal? What happens? Let's ask a vet, a human medical specialist, and let's bring in some farmers and ranchers and hear what the reality on the farm might be. So creating the forum for those conversations in itself is a win. And again, with fierce competitors, beef and chicken farmers sitting together, food companies that are normally competitors coming together to say, we need to figure this out and we can do it better together. So, begin with the end in mind. The biggest function of the Center for Food Integrity is actually understanding what Canadians think. And this is, again, unique. Many people in your organizations in this room spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on research every year, on usage and attitudes, on beef, on your brand, etc., but you don't share it and present the results publicly to your competitors, because that's just not the way we do. So this research is meant to be shared. The more people that know it, the better. It serves as a base so we all have an understanding. So my dad, the beef farmer, that's trying to figure out if he's going to be part of the sustainable beef movement or not, or just make my brother do it. He needs to know it, as well as the CEO of the biggest food companies in this country. So what do you think? Is the food system headed in the right direction or down the wrong track? Well, 50% of Canadians aren't sure. So, for the Americans in this room, it confirms that you are more opinionated, because less of you are unsure. This is a pretty simple question, right? That's not that hard. And 50% of Canadians are going, I don't know. I don't know what to think. And guess what? I can show you a question on hormones, antibiotics, environment, animal welfare, food safety. It looks almost identical to that. 16 million Canadians are going, I don't really know. I'm an optimist. Personally, I think that's a great opportunity to have a conversation with people to say, hey, here's some information that you wouldn't find on Google. I know, it's crazy. Google doesn't know everything, and I actually raise cattle for a living. Let's have a conversation about what that means. So I'm just giving you a couple highlights. You can find this research on foodintegrity.ca. The full report is on there. It's public. It's shared. Work it into your business, your life, whatever you need. The American version of this study is on foodintegrity.org. So same research, just different target audiences. So this is really important. This is on the exam if you've been sleeping so far. Keeping healthy food affordable is really, really important to Canadians and really important to Albertans where we are right here. So guess what? Growing sustainable beef is part of healthy affordable food. So don't forget that. And for the first time, we saw healthy affordable food higher than healthcare, economy, or energy. They love agriculture, increasingly positive impressions of Canadian agriculture at a record high. But record high, so you see a good trend line here from 41 to 61%. However, 61%, it won't get you into vet school. Right? That's just a theoretical example. So, still work to do, but definitely a positive trend line for us in Canada. However, so they love farmers, also equally record high numbers on perceptions of farmers. The fact that many food companies and retailers have Canadian farmers at the forefront of their ad campaigns is not a coincidence, right? It's like, why not? You're selling Canadian food, put the Canadian flag around a farmer and have that as your spokesperson. Awesome. The research shows it's a good thing, right? However, when we ask about specific questions, and I just put a little random sample of different questions up here to show you, because the answers are all the same. We think the issues are so different, hormones, antibiotics, pesticides, GMOs. You know, if you're a person that deals with antibiotics, you don't usually talk about pesticides. Guess what? To the public, they're all being one big nasty mess of unnatural something. And they feel equally concerned and or question marks about all of them. Earls. Remember that story? This was, I would say, and the response. After, I would say in my career of paying attention to food and farm issues, the most public reaction I've ever seen to a food story. Now, you just saw some data that maybe some people in marketing hadn't looked at. Canadians love Canadian farmers. Canadians love Canadian food. And you throw some Alberta beef in the mix, you got yourself a gunfight right there, right? And not just in Alberta, the whole country, right? And not just in agriculture. I was just visiting with a friend in Calgary who's a dentist, and she's like, wow, that Earls thing. She goes, I was really personally upset. And I'm like, really? And she goes, yeah, because I love the bigger, better burger, and it really upset me to think I'd have to boycott it. Right? So she's really thrilled she doesn't have to boycott the bigger, better burger. So there you go. So here's a Canadian protester. So for those of you from other countries, you need to know the reaction, and I just use Earls, and I just met our friend from Earls here, but I just use that to say that is the closest thing to a protest I've ever seen in Canada. Like, seriously, like, we usually sit down, let's talk about it. We're not comfortable with voicing strong opinions. I don't know what we would do in your American election right now. I don't know what we do. So this is the closest thing. So we're said, you know what this says? Our country is, pardon the pun, hungry for a conversation about our food, right? And embrace skepticism and embrace choice. Isn't choice awesome? The fact that people can criticize you with their mouth full is awesome. The fact that you can go into the grocery store and the egg counter is a 10-minute decision on what kind of eggs you want to buy, isn't that awesome? It's awesome. It doesn't have to be a problem. So here's what our research showed. Connecting with consumers with your shared values is 3 to 5 times more important than the facts. So, this is foreign to us in agriculture and food. We always send in the experts, right? Who knows the most about antibiotics? Let's get that expert. Who's the researcher on prions in BSc? Let's get that researcher on the news, because he knows the most about prions. It's like, you got a mom crying with the kid on TV. Is this beef going to kill me? We send in the researcher on prions. maybe that's not the right approach, right? We're not even in the right gunfight. We're in the wrong arena. We're not the apples and oranges. We're just in the wrong gunfight. So let's think about how do we connect with consumers on shared values first. Hey, you care about the environment? Awesome. I walk my land every day and just thank my lucky stars, and I'm going to leave this land in better shape for my kids than when my grandparents started here. That's shared values. So who do you believe on environmental issues? Farmers at the top of the list. And if you don't have your bionic eyes on, this is in that report that I shared. And if you don't know what bionic eyes are, you're too young for that reference, and that hurts me. But anyway, you'll note the credible information on environment. This is really important because when you're trying to communicate or have a conversation, who does the public actually believe and trust? And I wanted to point out, you'll see farmers are at the top of the list. David Suzuki, down below environmental researchers. He's lost a lot of ground on credibility in Canada. We started testing his name about 2006, and he was neck and neck with farmers. I'd always check the research the day it came out to see how we did against David Suzuki, right? But anyway, he's lost some ground. He's getting up there, like really. He's not as young as he used to be. Farmers associations, I put them on there for a reason, because traditionally, and I've worked for farm groups my whole career, farmers and our industry has relied on farmers associations to do all our communicating. And back in the day, I worked in the pork industry. Don't judge me. And our communications was our chairman would issue a statement or a press release with a quote that he would sign off on, and we would fax it out. I know. Right after the courier pigeon came the fax. And so now the game has changed. One person giving the message is 1990. In 2020, there are 30,000 messages happening every second, and how do you want to play in that game? So, some of the farm and food care efforts, and this is our role in having a conversation with Canadians, is actually putting a face to farming. This is a campaign we started in Ontario in 2002. I know, some of you were hardly born. And putting a face to farming. Here are three sisters. One's a vet. One works in the feed industry. They all farm. That steer happened to be the grand champion at the Royal Winter Fair last year. That was a coincidence. We just took his picture in the summer. I was wishing it was a heifer because she was so beautiful. But anyway, the point is, we've been putting the faces of farming out there for a long time. Good news maker and stereotype breaker. When I go into a classroom or talk to some consumers about what do you think a typical farmer looks like, we do this little game with tools where you pull stuff out of a bag, you know, like a cell phone. Would you think a farmer would use this? No. Right? How about lipstick? That always gets the kids. Would a farmer use this? No. I'm like, hey, I'm a farmer. I wear lipstick to the barn no, kidding. But anyway, breaking stereotypes and connecting people with people is absolutely key. And if I had to give everybody in this room one voice and one message, it was connect as people first. Why are you here other than the beautiful scenery? You're committed to beef, you're committed to something to do with the food industry, and you're passionate about it. Figure out what that story is, and it starts with your heart. Our second role is creating shared content. Now, some of our food company partners are responsible for radical transparency, right? Responsible sourcing. Every ingredient in every product in a grocery store, you're supposed to own that? That's hard. That's a lot. So our model is shared content. The people of Walmart don't have to answer every question on how beef cattle are raised, because guess what? We may not want them to make up their own answer, and maybe they've never seen a cow. So if we create some shared content that everybody can use, guess what? You get the experts a platform, and you get credible information, and you turn up the volume on reach. So Best Food Facts is a resource out of the U.S. This will be a North American resource now. There were 200 university and government researchers on that website already. We've just added our first 10 Canadian experts, and we're starting to populate it with Canadian content. There are 700 questions already answered on there with an Ask the Expert option. Anybody that has a website, you can put the Best Food Facts widget right on your website to say, hey, you got a question? Here's 200 experts, all third party, very important for credibility, right? No company experts. Real Dirt on Farming, we've reached about 2 million Canadians with this. It's a real book, it's a website, it's a social media, it's a blog. And I was just in Edmonton yesterday. This is an example of being a movement. So in addition to putting it into big newspapers and mailing it to doctors and dietitians and kind of our formal approach, You can take one of these. You can take one of these. I leave it on a plane. I was checking out of a hotel the other day. The lady asked me what I do. She's like, oh, it's so important to know where our food comes from. I'm like, here's a book. I was in Edmonton yesterday. A lady told me they were handing these out at the Save On grocery store in Edmonton. She goes, did you put them there? I'm like, no. And that is awesome. That is awesome, right? Because this is a movement. We all need to move, and this is just an example of a tool that we can all use. And then Virtual Farm Tours is a website which will be giving a major overhaul at the end of this month. We'll be announcing a new version, which will be farm and food tours. And we're starting with dairy, putting milk on the truck and turning it into cheese. We had 900,000 visitors to that site last year with no marketing money, because everybody promotes the same resource. And not everybody can go to a real farm, like some of the people got to go to ranches here yesterday. We've been doing farm tours for a long time. We call them I Love Our Job Days, and they are absolutely the best use of time. If you had to pick one tactic that you take back to wherever you live, to put influencers on a bus and meet real people, get a little bleep on their boots, we like to say, and meet them when they're right there in the field, when they're right there with cows, they're right there. It's so, so important. And we just started working with dietitians. We've just done some dietitian tours in the last 2 weeks, and the evaluations are off the charts, and there's social media action on what they learned on the farms. It's really powerful. And our model is, how do we take some of your content? So some of the great work that's being done at the Roundtable, some of the great work being done on an individual ranch, a transport driver, a genetics company, a researcher, how do we take those stories and amplify them? And so this is just an example, our Real Dirt on Farming blog. Any of you can submit content to us. If you've got a great story, something you're really excited about, a person you met, a really interesting innovation, share it on our blog. You don't have to create your own blog. So the concept is shared content, increase the reach. And then multiplying that, this week on Monday, I had it here somewhere, I don't know where I put it. Oh, here it is. In the Toronto Star and the Metro goes on the subways in Toronto, and they have Metro papers across the country in Canada. We had a full page of editorial written by a researcher at the University of Guelph on a dairy farmer, research funding, and a Q&A. And guess what? The Q&A was asked by a dietitian that was on our media tour last week, our dietitian tour rather, to a farm. She's from downtown Toronto, never been on a farm in her life. We took her to 2 farms. She's like, this is amazing. I need to tell all my Toronto friends, and what can I do to help? Well, the Toronto Star calls and says, hey, we got an opportunity for a full page. Hello, we're on a budget. We're like a charity. They're like, hey, we can cut you a deal and blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's make it happen in a hurry. We called this girl that we just met the day before and said, hey, would you like to ask the question, are there antibiotics in my meat? In the Toronto Star next week. She's like, I'd love to. And today she just wrote a blog about it, and it's being tweeted out by all the dietitians. See how it works? It's a collaboration network. And the concept of that is, let's take our good news stories and the 10,000 people we reach on Twitter, and you turn it up to 500,000 people in Toronto with something like this. So to wrap up, I would say the Coles notes are, we need to begin with the end in mind and actually research what consumers think and what real consumers want. People that eat beef and want to have a good steak dinner and not feel guilty about it. What's on their mind? What questions do they have? And how do we have a good conversation with them? And the fact that the overall impression of farmers and agriculture is at a record high, I see that as a huge opportunity and a win. The fact that 50% of Canadians aren't sure what direction our food system in is a huge opportunity, or it could be a huge threat if we decide not to do something about it. When we asked Canadians, do you think farmers are good stewards of the environment? Only 29% said yes. Ow, right? That hurts. Guess what? 60% said, I'm not sure. So all the work that's being discussed at this conference and all the good work in Canada on the Roundtable for sustainable beef, 2/3 of our population aren't sure. So that's needs improvement on the report card. And as my dad always says on the farm, if you want to drive change, you got to get out of the back of the truck. So to go back to my earlier opening comments, the reason we're in this room having this conversation today is the game has changed, and some of the people in our food industry, and as a beef farmer myself, I say we've been driven around in the back of the truck for a while on some of these issues, and the fact that we're having these conversations and creating opportunities to have conversations across the whole supply chain and directly with the public and things like I just showed you is absolutely what we need to do to get out of the back of the truck.